Nothing says Christmas time like a June.
Ibrahim Ahmed.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, you can hear me. Perfect.
Is now joining.
Welcome to our
Ibrahim Ahmed.
Just a couple keeping items before we get started. I just want to remind everyone to please
Is now joining.
through the presentation. Another thing we're going to do is save all your questions until the end, and we'll have a question and answer period. And to facilitate that, we'll ask that you use the hand raise function. And to do that, if you're unfamiliar with Teams, is there's along the top tool bar, I guess we'll call it, there's a reactions piece. And if you hover over that, hand will come up. So if you want to raise your hand, you can just raise your hand that way. And at the end of our presentations, I'll facilitate a question and answer by going through the list of people who have their hands raised. So those would be the housekeeping items. And again, yeah, so thank you for attending. Start the presentation. Awesome, so we'll get right into the presentation and look forward to any kind of questions people may have regarding Norfolk County's Grow Norfolk study. So Norfolk County has decided to embark on a growth management study, and what that means is we are going to study Norfolk County comprehensively to come up with policies to help provide guidance on where we're going to direct growth within the municipality to accommodate our projected population and economic growth over the planning horizon. And in this case, we're looking out till 2051. Growth management study is considered a comprehensive review as defined by the provincial policy statement, and it will be utilized during our next 5-year official plan review or potentially the development of a new official plan for Norfolk County. So what's included in this study and what Fabian and I will be working on is a review of the historic population and economic growth within the county, the number and type of building permits issued. We'll be analyzing our existing land supply to see how much land is currently designated for economic growth and residential growth. We'll also be completing an analysis of our infrastructure system and capacity. And we'll also be conducting an overarching policy framework review to see if there are any updates required to achieve the goals that are identified throughout the process. So a quick overview of what our work plan and our project timeline is. Some of these timelines have been shifted due to some capacity issues within the planning department, but generally the phases are the same. So phase 1 was our project initiation, and in that phase we've put together a terms of reference for the overall study. We've also put together engagement strategy, and those documents can be found on the Engage Norfolk website. So one key piece I forgot to mention at the beginning is Fabian and I will be throwing in plugs for our Engage Norfolk website, and we'll be showing you different ways that you can actually provide feedback regarding the growth management study. But we'll get to that through the presentation. Phase 2, we've broken into 2 phases. So phase 2A is our policy review and the preparation of technical reports. So through that, we have prepared a context report and a housing technical report, and we will be looking at a provincial policy statement conformity piece as well. And phase 2B, which has been completed, Norfolk County worked with Watson and Associates to complete our population and economic forecast, looking again until 2051. And that report can also be found on the Engage Norfolk website interested in the details of that report. Phase 3 is our opportunities and options phase. So in phase 3, we will be completing our land evaluation study. We'll be looking at ways Norfolk County can monitor our growth and make recommendations regarding how to keep track of that type of growth so that we can make better informed decisions regarding our planning applications moving forward. And phase 4 is where we'll actually be making our policy recommendations, and we'll be identifying any amendments if they're required, if they're determined to be required through the entire process. So that's exciting. We're looking to have that completed. I know the timeline says 2022. It's probably looking more so early 2023 for that. Another piece I should mention is throughout the entire process, we do have a public engagement, participation, and consultation piece. So through each of the components we will be working on through the growth management study, we have sort of built in, or we will be building in, engagement opportunities for the public. So stay tuned for all those notices. Apologize about that. We're just going to get the presentation back up. Perfect. So volume 1 of the study was completed, and it was the context report. And in that, staff analyzed how the growth study relates to the official plan. We did a complete review of the policy considerations, and we included a review, which included a review of the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, the Provincial Policy Statement. We did incorporate Norfolk County strategic priorities, and we did look at the directions contained within the official plan. We identified topics of consideration for the overall study, and we proposed growth management principles and objectives. So as part of this session, we are looking for feedback regarding the proposed principles and objectives that we will apply throughout the entire project. So on this slide, you will see the 6 themes that we included in the context report. So theme 1 is to encourage growth to occur in an efficient and integrated manner. Theme 2 is to encourage necessary infrastructure is developed to support the needs of a growing population. Number 3, endorse fiscal responsibility through the effective use of available financial tools. 4, support agricultural and industrial operations by reducing land use fragmentation and compatibility conflicts. 5, protect and enhance the natural environment and cultural heritage resources throughout the county. And 6, to promote intensification through creative design to support continued residential and economic growth in appropriate locations. So I mentioned we would be sort of plugging our Engage Norfolk website. So this slide kind of shows 2 opportunities for the public to contribute and provide your feedback. So one of the aspects we are seeking feedback on is the themes that we mentioned for our principles and objectives. So on the left side of the slide, we're encouraging everyone to go to the Ideas tab on the Engage Norfolk website and provide your ideas regarding our 6 themes. So whether you support them, whether we forgot one, if there's any kind of ideas you have regarding our objectives for the project, it would be helpful if you can include them in the ideas section. And then if you do have any kind of questions about the goals and objectives or the study as a whole, we also have a questions tab, where you can ask your questions and Fabian and myself will provide you an answer. So we thought those were interesting engagement tools for the project. So as I mentioned, we have completed the population projections working with Watson and Associates. So this slide is a summary of the outcomes of the study. So Watson provided us with 3 growth scenarios that Norfolk can consider. One of them being the low scenario, which is the light blue, which is forecasting total population of 84,900 for Norfolk County in 2051. A reference scenario, which was their recommended scenario, which projects a population of 88,800 in 2051, and a high scenario, which is forecasting, a total population of 92,700 people in Norfolk at a growth rate of 1%. And the pie chart there is the indication of their anticipated allocation of the population. So Simcoe is expected to sort of accommodate the largest percentage at 29% of the population growth. Waterford is at 14%, Hamlets and the rural area at 12%, Delhi at 10%, and sorry, I think I skipped Port Dover, and Port Dover at 27%. Sorry. Similarly, economic projections were also provided in the report in the same manner. So 3 scenarios with a low scenario, reference scenario, and a high scenario. And the projected total jobs are listed on the screen there, and they range from 31,200 for the low scenario to 34,100 for the high scenario. Again, a proposed breakdown of where jobs are anticipated. Simcoe is expected to accommodate 36% of the jobs, and Delhi at 10% of the jobs, Waterford at 12%, Port Dover at 17%, Hamlet and the remaining area also at 17%.
Port Dover and Simcoe, wow.
So volume 2, we completed a comprehensive review, or we will be completing a comprehensive review. So comprehensive review is a term that is defined in the provincial policy statement, which sets out a number of parameters for municipalities to follow and to achieve when determining how to grow moving forward. So it really does provide us with a roadmap of what needs to be studied in order for something to be considered a comprehensive review. So we are using the provincial policy statement definition as a guide. To date, and the definition of that, it's long, and it is actually contained within our context report, which can be found on the Engage Norfolk website. But to date, the work that has been completed by staff to achieve the goals of the definition of a comprehensive review include the population projections, which I just went through, which provided projections on the population and the economic forecasts. And it actually provided a preliminary allocation of where the population will be allocated. Oh, again, Engage Norfolk website. So what we're looking for here as well is there is a tab on the Engage Norfolk website called Map. And what we're actually looking for is for residents or anybody really to kind of go in there and add some pins to the map to kind of help staff learn where the community wants to see growth happen or how we can grow. So the pins include residential uses or infill development, industrial uses, commercial and office uses, and there's a pin for active transportation. So if you go in there, you can drop pins throughout Norfolk County of where you'd like to see certain kind of development. So I definitely encourage anybody to kind of go in there and add a couple pins to the map, and you can put comments in there as well. So Fabian will present the housing technical paper.
Yeah, so for volume 3, the housing technical paper, this was completed recently at the beginning of the year. So the housing trends that have been in the report, it outlines housing trends that are currently the province of Ontario is experiencing and essentially how it relates to Norfolk County. So there are essentially 5 main trends that we've outlined. And so the first one being reduced affordability. So with the increased continuous cost of housing, homes are becoming less and less affordable, resulting in housing issues. The second trend is the housing hardship concept and how this impacts reduced access to home ownership. So the housing hardship concept, essentially what it is that when individuals spend either half or majority of their income on covering their housing costs and not having other money for covering their basic needs of living. So the third component is the increase in multi-generational housing. So what that is essentially having either multiple generations of families living in the same home or multiple families living in the same home together. And the fourth trend that we have seen is an increase in condominium development. So there's essentially more condo towers or apartment buildings that are being constructed because you can fit 4 people in a smaller space because of density. They're also more affordable in comparison to the stereotypical single detached home. And the fifth trend is short-term rentals and their impacts on the long-term rental market. So the housing technical paper was specifically geared towards accessory dwelling units, short-term rentals, and garden suites. And through Bill 108 that was recently passed, it requires official plans, municipalities to implement within their official plans policies surrounding implementing a total of 2 accessory residential dwelling units. So that means that properties are eligible to have up to a total of 3 units. So that means there would be the primary residential unit, an interior dwelling unit, and an exterior dwelling unit. So either in like in an accessory building on a property. So in the Planning Act, it specifically outlines that you cannot have 2 interior units or 2 detached units. It has to be 1 of each, including the primary unit, to add up to 3 in total. So on this slide, you'll see there's a bunch of common accessory dwelling units that we see throughout the county as well as in Ontario. Those are images depicting the types. So the first 3 images there are essentially the interior dwelling units, and the I guess the fourth and the fifth one, the last ones there, are what would be referred to as either the detached or those located within ancillary dwelling, so in a detached building. So as I said, the official plans and zoning bylaws essentially needs to be updated to conform to the recent Planning Act changes to allow for a total of 3 units on 1 lot, for 2 ADUs on 1 lot, to have 1 within the primary and 1 within an accessory building. And it does not allow for 2 of the same type. It has to be 1 of each. The other component, oh, I went a little too far there. The other component of the housing technical paper was looking at short-term rentals. So the City of Toronto defines short-term rentals as all or part of a dwelling unit that's rented out for less than 28 consecutive days in exchange for payment. And this includes bed and breakfast, but does not include hotels and motels. So the City of Toronto was used as a case study because they actually went to the Ontario Municipal Board and fought, and they were successful in their litigation for short-term rentals. We also analyzed other municipalities, which included the Niagara region, which was the City of St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, Niagara-on-the-Lake. We looked at Bruce County, Prince Edward County, Barrie, Brantford, Peterborough, and Wellington County. So in the City of Toronto, there's 2 main types of licensing components. That's short-term rental, licensing for short-term rental companies for like Airbnb and Vrbo as examples of types of companies, and for short-term rental operator licenses. For the types of residences that can be rented for short-term rentals, this will include short single detached dwellings, apartments, condominiums, if it's allowed through the condominium corporation, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, secondary suites or accessory dwelling units, and laneway homes. So for licensing for short-term rental companies, it's essentially the actual definition is a company facilitating or brokering short-term rental reservations online and receiving payment for this service. So a company can be any company that offers short-term rentals, and they advertise those rentals on Airbnb or Vrbo, which is the short-term rental platform. So companies are essentially required to obtain a license to operate in the City of Toronto. This is something that we're considering looking at and potentially implementing in Norfolk County. So that's why we're looking at all the options that how Toronto essentially did things to see if there was anything that we could learn from, and the way that they've implemented their short-term rental company licenses is that companies are required to pay a one-time fee of $5,000 and an ongoing fee of $1 for every night that a short-term rental is booked through a specific rental company. They're required to sign a data sharing agreement with the municipalities, and this ensures that properties that are available for rent are safe, and that the municipality would be aware of all registered properties, which would assist with any potential bylaw complaints that might stem from short-term rentals. And it also creates another tax revenue for the municipality. The licensing for short-term rental operators is different than companies. So for companies, it's an actual company that's providing the short-term rental, whereas a short-term rental operator is a homeowner who would essentially wants to post their home or their space as a property that's available to rent for a short-term basis. So the definition that Toronto uses is people who are renting their homes or rooms on a short-term basis for a period of less than 28 consecutive days. And who can be an operator? This includes homeowners, tenants, and multiple individuals living in the same home. So say, for example, if you have a duplex or a triplex, any person within the duplex or triplex can list their unit within that building for rent, but you can only post your own unit available for rent. You can't post other people's units available for rent. Apparently that's happened in the past, and they've eliminated that. So operators are required to obtain a license to post their property as a short-term rental. There's fees for the operators of $50 every year, and subject to an increase. And a license is required for 1 year after the date of registration approval. And once they actually receive approval of their application, then they're able to advertise their home as a short-term rental on a platform such as Airbnb. And the last type of licensing or registration that the City of Toronto offers is essentially titled short-term rental operator registration. And what that is an alternative to licensing for the registration system. It's designed to address complaints as it relates to short-term rentals, which includes noise, garbage, and parking. So any usual bylaw complaints that we would see. And it allows municipal staff to obtain a database of short-term rental operators and can provide information to bylaw enforcement officers. Staff actually met with Airbnb back in October to 2021, and Airbnb is committed to operator education and are open to working with staff to regulate short-term rentals within Norfolk County. So the preliminary conversations have essentially happened, and they're continuing. And so we'd like the public or anyone to share your ideas on Engage Norfolk with us. The purpose of this slide is to show the upcoming virtual engagement sessions that we have essentially created for the Engage Norfolk project. So the topics include, on April 4th, it was the land supply discussions. April 7th will be a session surrounding accessory dwelling units. And on April 11th, it'll be a session that's focusing mainly on short-term rentals. And you can go on the website, partake in the surveys, add in any feedback that you may have prior to or even after the engagement session's been held. And if you're not able to actually make the session, you can still complete this. As I said, you can complete the survey. You can also sign up to be kept in the loop of upcoming things, like upcoming meetings and when other types of engagements are happening. Excuse me. So the fourth component of the growth management study is a LEAR study. And what a LEAR study is a land evaluation error review study. And it's a tool that's been developed by OMAFRA to evaluate the importance and viability of agricultural lands using characteristics and factors that impact agricultural potential. So the PPS provides direction regarding when a LEAR study is required for municipalities to conduct. And what it does is that it helps the municipality establish official plan land use designations such as specialty crop areas, rural areas, and prime agricultural lands. This allows it allows the municipality to provide guidance on where to direct development. examples of what a prime agricultural land means is that in the PPS it's defined as specialty crop areas or areas that have a soil classification of class 1, 2, and 3, which are outlined as the more prime agricultural lands. And then there's different soil types that go from 1 through 7, 7 being the least viable for agriculture, 1 being the most viable. And that helps in terms of identifying the priority of protection. For the LEAR project, it supplements the land supply study. It helps provide options to council regarding where to accommodate growth. It also will assist in recommending informations for the next official plan review. The purpose of the LEAR study is to confirm the location of where prime agricultural areas are, and by identifying where they are, you're at the same time identifying where they're not. And so by doing so, it'll assist in developing land use designations that would either further protect agriculture or allow other forms of development to happen on those lands potentially. So the PPS provides a framework to enable this exercise through a provincially approved land evaluation system and methodology. This enables municipalities to establish other land use designations such as rural lands if they don't compromise the prime agricultural areas, which their study helps to identify. So the LEAR method and principles. The LEAR study is comprised of 2 major components, which is the LE component, which stands for land evaluation, and the AR component, which stands for area review. So the land evaluation assesses soil classification or soil conditions for agriculture, and this is done by using mapping through GIS systems to identify and compare agricultural capability for fields. The area review, what it does is it considers other factors of agricultural potential, such as land fragmentation and how land is used. So the way that these scores are calculated is that you take the LE score and you take the AR score and you combine the two. Areas that have the highest score are deemed as the more prime for agriculture, and scores that are essentially lower are not prime. So how is the LEAR study conducted? GIS software digitally analyzes spatial data to develop quantitative scores for land, and these scores are weighted by using factors that are determined by the municipality, with higher scores representing the units with the greatest agricultural potential. And by mapping the agricultural land base, this aids the county in making land use planning decisions as well as economic development decisions for the future of Norfolk County. And if anybody wants more information, you can find that on our Engage Norfolk page, where you are more than welcome to register yourselves to be registered for updates. You can contact Jennifer or myself via email, and our information is posted there on the slide. It's also on the website. And if you're looking for any full-length staff reports, you can also find those on the website that pertain to this study. So anything related to this study that's gone to council will be on this page. It's essentially the hub for anything Grow Norfolk. So upcoming next steps of the project essentially include April 4th is the land supply stakeholders discussions. April 7th is an accessory dwelling unit public engagement event that will be held virtually. April 11th is the short-term rental public engagement event that will also be held virtually. And the statutory public hearing is to be determined still based on, depending on how each component moves forward. So those dates will all be updated on our project webpage as well. And we've already started doing our presentations to our advisory boards. And we're going to continue with the LEAR study and begin the land supply evaluation. For other reports and resources, again, it can be found on the project webpage. And if there's any other information that you're looking for such as terms of reference, engagement strategy, this can all be found on the website, and other resources such as like the county official plan or zoning bylaw can all be found on the project on the Norfolk County website as well. So that concludes our presentation. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. You can put them in the chat. You can put your hand up via the reactions function. If you don't feel comfortable asking questions on this forum, you can also just send us an email and we can have those discussions offline if you so wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. So just to reiterate Fabian's message, if you do have a question and you want to ask it here, please use the reactions, the hand raise function, or type your question into the chat. And it looks like we already have 2 questions. The first one is for Fabian. Fabian, will the LEAR results be balanced with ecological importance and significance, i.e. considering some ecologically significant areas would rank low on agricultural potential?
Yeah, so in terms of the LEAR study, so it kind of, the way it works is like urban areas, because there's essentially no agricultural potential on there. So some areas such as like conservation areas would be essentially left out of the study because they're already designated for conservatory purposes. So it could be that depending on where those ecological lands are located, they may or may not be included in the study in terms of their proximity to agricultural lands. But the way that it works is that it would essentially have like it would, if it edges on a border, it might be included, it might not. It really depends on what type of ecological lands are and how much of an impact it would have on agricultural lands. So it's really on, it takes a whole blanketed area, but it tends to include more often than not ecological lands. Not sure if that answers your question, but.
I also just want to add to Fabian's response is that when we're doing the land supply piece, we'll also kind of evaluate the natural heritage land in Norfolk County, and it will kind of all come together as one land study. So the LEAR study would be like one component of it, and the score ranking may be impacted by the ecological resource that's there, as Fabian mentioned. However, we will kind of marry everything together with the land evaluation as well. So it will all become, we'll end up with one recommendation to council using all of the factors of the study. Okay, second question is again from the chat, and it's for Fabian again. Is there a public consultation process with the LEAR study?
So with the LEAR study, there is a public consultation process, as we'll have to, I believe we have to go to do a public hearing, but when that is, at this time, we're not sure because, as Jen said at the beginning, we have had some staff changes throughout our department, so that's thrown off our timeline. So our original timelines of when the project will be, like our checkpoints throughout the project have changed. So at this time, we don't necessarily know when that will be, but we would keep anybody who's registered up to date on those upcoming sessions and dates.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. And one thing to add to Fabian's response is, as we've been researching other LEAR studies that have been completed in Ontario, which there haven't been many, I think staff have landed on creating a working group to help inform the process. And as part of the working group, there will be representatives from different facets of the agricultural community, as well as an opportunity for a member of the public to sit on that working group. So there will be an opportunity for other members of the public to apply to be on the working group. So there is that component as well in terms of public consultation for the study.
The one thing I'd like to add too is that for LEAR studies, there isn't the idea and the intention behind a LEAR study isn't specifically to focus on one individual property. It's to look at the area as a whole. So the idea behind a LEAR study isn't on a case-by-case basis. It's to do like a blanketed area for coverage, and then the statistics of where those scores are provided are based on those numbers of like how they would impact the quality of the land and if they would have any impact on agricultural potential, as opposed to looking up a very specific property, if that property can be changed and whatnot to a different land use designation. That's not the intention of the study. It's to do the county as a whole. I see there's another hand. I don't know if, I don't know.
Aline, if you'd like to ask your question.
One was more of an administrative thing, just because I was looking at those two sessions for ADUs and STRs, and there's dates but no times. Is that because the times are still up in the air, or?
Thank you for your question. Yes, I think we're still trying to figure out and design those sessions, but as soon as we have more information, we will definitely update the website. So I would look out for that in the next couple days or so.
Okay, shoot, I had another question that was more pertinent and now it's completely flown out of my brain. I may have to raise my hand again in a second when I remember what it is. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. We'll just move on, and then when you're ready, stick your hand up again. Sorry, I'm just reading a question in the chat. So can you elaborate on how you plan to ensure housing that is developed will be affordable and not to replicate the areas of most larger municipality issues of new houses being built well out of the average person's affordability range? An additional issue being local people getting well outbid by out-of-towners. So this is definitely a concern that the planning department has and has been identified by our housing colleagues as well. This is a challenge for planning departments across the province and the country. It is something that we are going to grapple with. We don't have an exact answer right now because we're still sort of studying the housing component, but we will be collaborating with our housing counterparts, the housing and homelessness teams, and we will be really reviewing our current housing policies in the official plan. So one of the issues that has been identified is that we have identified in our official plan targets, and it has come up a couple of times. How are we going to ensure that our targets are being achieved? So there may be an outcome of a recommendation that we have to strengthen the policies in the official plan. But at this time, I can't elaborate further than that because we're still analyzing and we're still reviewing the housing policies.
The one thing I would like to add is through the Planning Act changes, through Bill 108, it's allowing municipalities to implement more accessory dwelling units as another option. So the idea is to provide more units that would essentially be available for people to live in. But in terms of the affordability component, the idea is that we'd be providing more options for housing. In terms of it would be more affordable in comparison to, you know, like other options for housing, but the municipality is working towards trying to provide more units for people to live in within Norfolk County. Paul, I see your hand is up.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, great, thanks. The question's for you, Fabian. It's about the ADUs. Did you say there was a bill passed that was requiring that there be more allowed than in the past on the, there was a new bill or something, or changes to the Planning Act or something? I thought I heard you say.
Yep, so that's Bill 108.
Bill 108, sorry, I just didn't get that. Okay.
That's okay. And yeah, so the change is that it allows for a total of 3 units on one property, so the primary and then 2 accessory dwelling units.
Yes. Yeah.
So the thing is just, you know, even though it says that you can provide up to 3 per unit, there's still other elements that regulate that, like such as like being able to provide enough parking on the property for the units, and like whether or not how those are being proposed, right? So if it's an interior unit, if it's going to be within the basement, if somebody's building an addition onto a house, you would still have to, there's still other elements that they would have to abide by, such like setbacks for properties and whatnot.
Exactly. Yeah, but that's good. If you can meet those requirements, you could go up to 3 on some properties. I just know that's a change, but that's good. Thank you.
Helene, I think your hand is up.
Yep, I remembered my question, which was in terms of the growth study, the numbers that you guys put forward in those charts as to the projected growth for the different areas in Norfolk, were those numbers determined taking into account the recent announcement with the big, huge Empire, like the proposed Empire development out by Nanticoke? Because that seems like that's a huge number that if it wasn't accounted for, it would potentially shift those.
Hi, Helene. The Watson report was completed before the announcement was made, so it doesn't necessarily include that specific piece of land. I will say though, Watson, when they were completing our growth study, they were completing other growth studies in our surrounding, like in the surrounding municipalities. So they did have a lot of knowledge of what was happening in the surrounding areas, and they're pretty confident in their projections in the plan, in the study. Sorry.
Okay, and just as a second different question on the ADUs, that Bill 108 stuff, is that the rules around the increased amount of ADUs allowed and what type of ADUs are allowed, specifically being the not 2 of the same type? Does that mean that there is no flexibility for Norfolk to sort of modify that approach in any way should they decide to? Like, I mean, I'll speak about this more when I inevitably participate in the ADU consultation, but in regards to why you can't have 2 units in a freestanding structure, or why you can't have 2 units inside like ADUs inside the primary structure. I'm just curious why those decisions were made that way, and if there's any flexibility to treat it differently when we implement that on our end here in Norfolk.
Thank you, Helene. So the Planning Act is the one that actually is the piece of legislation that actually dictates how ADUs can be applied. So the Planning Act provides or enables Norfolk County to permit accessory dwelling units. And so because the Planning Act is extremely clear in that you can have 1 interior unit and 1 exterior or detached or ancillary, I believe is the word they use in the Planning Act, unit, Norfolk County, there really is no flexibility in terms of permitting 2 ADUs in a detached structure, because our enabling legislation is the Planning Act. There's also, some may argue, the zoning bylaw permits, let's say, a triplex. And if you do want additional units, you could also maybe pursue a zoning amendment for a different dwelling type to accommodate the number of units one may want to achieve on a property.
I guess that's also, you know what, I'll leave it to the ADU discussion. I won't hijack all the time talking about that now. Thank you for your answer, Jen.
Oh, no problem. Anybody else have any other questions, reactions, comments? Please throw them in the chat. Throw your hand up in the meeting. Fabian and I are here to respond to your questions. Okay, I guess so. If that's it for the questions, on behalf of Fabian and myself, I'd like to thank you for attending today's session, listening to our presentation. Please, 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 if you have any other questions, reach out to Fabian or myself. As he noted, our contact information is on the Engage Norfolk website. We'll also be posting these slides on the Engage Norfolk website, which contains our contact information as well. Please register for upcoming engagement sessions as well. And yeah, please tell everybody about the Engage Norfolk site and add your questions, ideas, pins, complete the surveys, and we definitely look forward to hearing from everyone. So with that being said, thank you very much.